today I am going to discuss about some 25 important judgment delivered by the Supreme Court in different cases, including the evolution of basic structure doctrine and the right to privacy in the case Puttaswamy judgment in the recent past in 2017. So from today I am going to start this series, and the topic of discussion for today is the A.K. Gopalan case of 1950. So before starting this discussion, I have already mentioned that I am going to discuss 25 most Supreme Court important judgments which saved Indian democracy and saved Indian democracy from the totalitarianism or the tyranny of executive government as such. So what is the background of this A.K. Gopalan case? Now, this A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, in that case, the Supreme Court interpreted the fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. In this case, it held that the protection under Article 21 is available only against arbitrary executive action and not from arbitrary legislative action. So these two are different. One is framing the law. Legislative action means framing the law, and executive action means implementing the law. So legislative action, Supreme Court in that case can declare that Article 21 is not available for the arbitrary legislative action. Means Supreme Court is not going to check whether the law is good or bad. Supreme Court is going to check on the executive action. Okay. This means that state can deprive the right to life and personal liberty of a person based on a law made by the legislatives. This is because the expression procedure established by law is different from the expression of due process of law in the American Constitution. So what are these two terms? Procedure established by law means the law is not going to be checked whether it is fair or unfair. And in the case of due process law, the law itself is going to be checked whether it is fair or unfair. Okay. Hence, the validity of a law that has prescribed a procedure cannot be even questioned on the ground that the law is unreasonable, the law is unfair, or the law is unjust. These are not grounds to question a particular law, because this is on the hands of legislators. This is Supreme Court is not going to check whether the legislative action is good or legislative action is unfair. Supreme Court is only going to check that executive action, how fair the law is implemented or how unfairly the law is going to be implemented. This was the theme of the judgment in the A.K. Gopalan case. Secondly, the Supreme Court held that personal liberty means only liberty relating to the person or the body of the individual. So it's a very narrow mindset or narrow ground of the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court. And only a free man can enjoy freedom under Article 19 of the Constitution, and detention by law takes away the right of Article 19 from that individual. Okay. Article 19 and 21 of the Indian Constitution are not related to each other, as Article 21 is guaranteed against loss of personal liberty and Article 19 provides protection against unreasonable restrictions. The court therefore upheld the constitutionality of Preventive Detention Act of 1950. So this was the brief of A.K. Gopalan case. Now come to the discussion. What was the background? Who was A.K. Gopalan? He was a political opponent of the government and had been detained several times since independence or since December 1947. In 1950, he was again detained under this Preventive Detention Act of 1950 and filed a writ petition under Article 32 of Indian Constitution challenging his detention. He argued that the act was unconstitutional, means this Preventive Detention Act of 1950, as argued by him, was unconstitutional as it violated his fundamental rights available under Article Clause 1 subclause D, that is right to freedom of movement, and Article 21, that is right to life and personal liberty, as the detainee is not given any reason for his detention. Okay, the detainee has not been informed the ground on which he has been detained. The case was heard by a 6-judges constitutional bench of the Supreme Court of India and was decided on May 19, 1950. So, what were the issues involved before the court? Whether the Preventive Detention Act violates the Article 19 and Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. This was the first issue. Second issue is whether Article 19 and 21 of the Indian Constitution are dependent on each other, and if there is any relation between the articles, or they are independent to each other. Whether the procedure established by law under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution is same as the due process of law expressed in the American Constitution. Okay, so these are the 3 issues involved in this case. Now, we have already seen the opinion or judgments delivered by the court in the first slide. So come to the dissenting opinion, because this is important. Justice Fazal Ali was the only dissenting judge in the 6-judges bench for this case. He argued that preventive detention under Preventive Detention Act of 1950 violated fundamental rights of citizen under Article 21, which guarantees the right to life and personal liberty of an individual. He believed that the majority's interpretation of Article 21 as only applying to physical liberty was too narrow, and that it should encompass also the right to freedom of speech and expression. That means he correlates these two, means Article 19 and Article 21 is interrelated to each other according to Justice Fazal Ali's dissenting opinion. He argued that the Act did not provide a fair and just procedure for detention, as it did not allow for the detainee to be informed of the ground of detentions to be challenged in the court. Okay. He also believed that the Act violated Article 19, which guarantees the right to freedom of speech and expression, as it allowed for the restriction of these rights without any proper justification. He argued that the Act should be struck down as unconstitutional, as it violated the basic principle of natural justice and human rights. So this was the dissenting opinion from Justice Fazal Ali. Now, what are the key implications of this case? The judgment in the A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras was later criticized for its narrow interpretation of fundamental rights and for giving too much discretion to the hands of executive in the matters of preventive detention. Justice Fazal Ali's dissenting opinion went on to become or to set an example of a more liberalized viewpoint for fundamental rights and served as a basis for future decision that expanded the scope of these rights. Okay, so hereby I am going to end this discussion. Thank you for being with me. Bye bye.